I'm going to be starting a new series today, which should see us through to the end of this term. And we're going to be doing a graphite drawing, a very detailed graphite drawing of a study of a skull. So I've got my reference set up here for you to see, so it's just using one of my anatomical models that I've photographed. And it's got a nicely photographed setup, so very bright central portion of the cranium. So that's going to be the lightest point of the drawing, and then kind of getting gradually darker as the skull sort of curves around, and it's in a reasonably interesting sort of dynamic composition, so quite good as a basis for, say, understanding the important aspects of the portrait, the anatomical portrait. And also it's just interesting in its own right as a form. So we'll be building this up kind of gradually over several weeks, and this week we're going to be starting with just the basic shapes, so kind of getting a gesture for it and starting to put in some notes for the basic structure. In terms of materials, I'm going to be just using I've got this graphite pencil, this kind of entire graphite pencil, and then I'll be switching over to this, it's like a mechanical pencil with a kind of 0.5, I think, 0.5 millimeter lead. But you can use pretty much any pencils that you like. And I'm working on a sort of cream paper. And it's Canson Mi Tientes that I'm working on. And finally, I have a little kneadable eraser which I'll be using to erase. To get started with today, I'm going to place the skull, so figure out how large it's going to be in the drawing, and start to give its gesture. So in terms of gesture, I'm going to be working this way. Instead of everything being sort of super straight liney like sometimes they are in my videos, this is going to be a little bit sort of softer and kind of working from a soft sort of basis to something that becomes established in a crisper way. So kind of just starting to work with fuzziness, and we're going to be kind of thinking about, in terms of the placement, how it's a sort of tapered fuzzy egg, basically. So it's coming down to a point down here, stretching out back here, thinking about the tilt. So just thinking about how these circles are working, how they're sort of spiraling around. Trying to make sure we get sufficient tilt out the front there. And now, still using fairly fuzzy lines, beginning to become a bit more specific with them. So starting to intersperse some straighter lines within these curves, and beginning to look a bit more for sort of suggestions of shadows as well. So you can see these shapes beginning to emerge. And they emerge quite freely and easily from those very loose kind of initial shapes that we placed in. I'm just going to make so anywhere that the background's going to be a lot darker Just going to note that in slightly darker at this point, just to separate it out from those shadows on the skull, which are quite a lot lighter. So still keeping the shape simple, but we want to block them in a little bit more heavily. Sort of like putting a jigsaw puzzle together almost at this stage. Trying to get all these shapes to lock in. So I also want to start laying in a bit of a suggestion of the background. So the background's going to be coloured. I don't mind too much if I smudge what I have as well. So we're working from a fairly smudgy basis with this one. So I'm happy to kind of build tone in a fairly sort of smudged way, rather than leaving everything super neat. I'm also bearing in mind the fact that pretty much everything in the skull is going to end up quite a bit darker than this central section. So we really want this central band to kind of glow in the center. And the important thing in this stage is just that the shapes are nicely kind of laid in. And as I say, they can be loose, they don't have to be super precisely laid in, but so I can also just sort of lightly start to get this darker shadow. When I say light, it's going to be reasonably dark, just lighter than it will end up, because it's going to end up being as dark as the paper can possibly go. But at this stage, given that we're just feeling out general shapes and kind of trying to get everything placed, it doesn't have to be as dark as it possibly can go. I also don't want to push it too dark immediately, because if we start to like really force the pencil down early on, we'll create too glossy a surface. And one thing we want to avoid is that kind of glossy quality that you get with graphite. The way we avoid that is just by kind of building up our darks gradually. So I'm never pressing hard down on the pencil. What I'm doing is I'm spinning it around. Using the mechanical pencil gives me a fine point. I'm just trying to make sure I get tone into all the little grooves of the paper. And it depends a bit on the paper that you're using as well. So like more textured paper will take a little bit longer to get your pencil into all those grooves versus really smooth paper. So just working on this shadow edge starts to pop the skull out slightly, which is good. I don't have to be too definite about exactly where the shadow ends down here. We can kind of figure that out. as we go later on in the drawing. So we're nearly at a point we've got a sufficient level of detail for this stage. Good point to start working from when we start back up next session. So you can work from pretty much any skull reference that you can find, or if you've got a model yourself, or if you order a model yourself, you can work, and you can also work from life. I mean, that's probably ideal, I would say. It's a bit easier for me to kind of demonstrate using a photograph so you can see what I'm working from, but ideally you would want to set this up and work from life. And ideally try to set it up with this, find a reference or set it up with this sort of fairly dramatic lighting is ideal with this piece, just because what we're going to work towards is that very bright kind of central portion of the drawing, so that our modelling is really quite fully developed. Yeah, that's pretty much it for today. So we've got a nice block in of the skull pretty quickly. Got our tones sort of roughed in. Might just lightly kind of put a tone over the bottom of the skull here, getting gradually lighter, just because we want to start developing that sense of it getting lighter in towards the center there. So we're already starting to think about that modeling. But yeah, that's it for today. So next session we'll be kind of developing on from this, so starting to make adjustments where necessary to any of the shapes that aren't quite right. But on the whole, that's not a bad starting point. Pretty good block in. So if you go for something roughly this level of detail, that's a good starting point in the drawing like this. But yeah, hopefully you found it useful. As always, you can sign up to our YouTube to follow all these videos from myself and other tutors. And you can follow the link through to OCAD if you want to sign up for private tuition, or not private tuition, but tuition through the platform from myself and other tutors, based on all the work that you make during these sessions. But yeah, that's it, and I'll see you guys soon.